free man you are. What will you do without freedom?
In 1983, while traveling through Scotland, screenwriter Randall Wallace stood in front of Edinburgh Castle and noticed a statue bearing his own last name, William Wallace. He had never even heard the name before, but learning that this man was considered Scotland's greatest national hero immediately captured his attention. Wallace decided to research the story, only to discover that there were almost no solid historical records about William Wallace. Even Winston Churchill had once noted how little could actually be written about him. As a result, the story of Braveheart was largely built upon a romantic epic poem written in the 15th century, known as Blind Harry's the Wallace. From the very beginning, Braveheart was shaped as a blend of history and myth. At one point, Brad Pitt was considered for the role of William Wallace. Mel Gibson initially wanted Pitt to star, and the director's chair was first offered to Terry Gilliam, who turned it down. Ironically, Gibson had previously rejected a role in Gilliam's A Tale of Two Cities. After several creative uncertainties, Mel Gibson ultimately took control of both directing and starring in the film himself. The similarities between William Wallace and Spartacus are no coincidence. Gibson has often cited Spartacus as a major inspiration, since both figures rise up against a foreign power on behalf of their people. Another influence was the Big Country, particularly in terms of visual style and narrative tone. This combination helped turn Braveheart into a modern epic rooted in ancient storytelling traditions. One of the film's most emotional moments was altered due to a symbolic detail. Originally, Randall Wallace wanted the story to begin with Wallace as an adult, but later added a childhood prologue. In the first draft, Wallace receives a rose at his father's funeral, until someone pointed out that the rose is a symbol of England. It was replaced with a thistle, a small change that carried deep national meaning. Despite its success, Braveheart angered many Scots because of its portrayal of Robert the Bruce. Gibson responded by stating that the film was largely fictional and that historical changes were made for dramatic impact. Ironically, Gibson himself initially refused the role, believing he was too old, but Paramount would only finance the film if he starred. And so, Gibson ended up both in front of and behind the camera. When the film was released, historians fiercely criticized it. Gibson responded with a single sentence: "I didn't give you a history lesson, I gave you a cinematic experience." He openly admitted that Wallace may not have been a flawless hero in real life, but insisted that cinema must first entertain, then provoke thought, and finally inspire. In reality, the Irish fought against Wallace. Yet in the film, they fight alongside him. Gibson explained that showing the Irish aligned with the English would have confused audiences, and even the Irish and Scottish actors themselves were reluctant to portray fighting each other. Certain visual details also stretch reality. Wallace's wife is buried in fabric far too fine for the medieval era. The infamous rite of first night scene is widely considered a myth by historians and was likely never practiced in Britain. Even the famous height difference is reversed. The real King Edward was tall, but Wallace was even taller, something the casting could not reflect. The iconic blue face paint was another creative decision. Originally, Gibson wanted a simple cross, but the makeup team pushed for something more visually striking, creating one of cinema's most unforgettable images. Gibson remained on set for 105 consecutive days, calling the experience more exhausting than filming 3 Lethal Weapon movies back-to-back. Still, he embraced the isolation from Hollywood studios, seeing it as a form of creative freedom. Exactly what Wallace himself fought for. Battle scenes were intense and often dangerous. Real arrows were used instead of digital effects. Over 1,600 extras took part, many from Irish military reserves. At times, real rivalries broke out, forcing scenes to be reshot. Despite the chaos, the worst injury was a broken nose. Originally, Braveheart was nearly 4 hours long and far more violent. Test screenings resulted in an NC-17 rating, forcing Gibson to personally cut or reframe the most brutal scenes. Somewhere, a much bloodier version of the film still exists. The realism was so convincing that animal welfare organizations investigated whether real horses had been killed. In reality, the production used massive mechanical horses propelled by nitrogen-powered rails. Despite being a Scottish story, most of the film was shot in Ireland. Even more ironic, Scottish characters were often played by Irish actors, and Irish characters by Scots. When Braveheart premiered, British newspapers accused it of nationalism and xenophobia. Some saw it as political propaganda. Others saw it as a poet. Some saw it as political propaganda. Others saw it as a poetic tribute to Scotland's identity and longing for freedom. Yes, Braveheart is historically inaccurate in many ways, but Mel Gibson and Randall Wallace were always honest about one thing. They were not teaching history. They were telling a story. And that is where cinema's true power lies. This has been another video from Scene Diary. Thank you for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and support the channel. See you in the next one.